Hello, everyone. My name is Susan Driver. I'm a professor at York University in Communication and Media Studies, and I'm working on a larger project on youth climate justice storytelling. And today I've decided to focus on a small piece of my bigger project, which addresses the relational dimensions of friendship within the organizing and activist process. So I hope it's useful to you. I'm not using slides, PowerPoint. So if you want to just turn off the visuals and listen, that's fine. I'm just going to be reading from my paper. The crisis is often framed in terms of young people experiencing fear and anxiety. As Britt Ray writes in her book, Generation Dread, there is a growing awareness of how youth become emotionally stuck within immobilizing predicaments of climate grief, shock, isolation, centering on the intensifying logics of loss and scarcity. These discourses emphasize what youth lack or are losing, focused on accelerating social, economic, and ecological catastrophes within end of the world narratives that leave little room for alternative relational possibilities. Similarly, when the mainstream media focus on young people's climate resistance and actions, they highlight opposition and alienation as individualized reactions to adult decisions and choices. Centering upon relational conflicts and divisions, young activists are rarely recognized for their connective, caring, and generative capacities that rely upon and support a myriad of embodied material and social relationships, building solidarities and fostering friendships. While so much media attention fixates on divisive events and exceptional heroic subjects, the more subtle features of what Aaron Manning calls minor gestures of daily political work, those facets of response that exceed institutional rationality carried out by young people nurturing activist relationships and expressing meaningful connections to the world, are emerging in prolific and subtle ways. Against individualistic rhetorics, oppositional logics, and apocalyptic narratives focused on destructiveness and detachment, young activists around the world are expressing ways of feeling, thinking, and acting that counter these one-sided abstractions by affirming relational qualities of interdependency, abundance, and reciprocity. Such approaches foster conditions through which to build social and ecological proximities grounded in care, joy, and curiosity. My paper explores some of the ways young activists cultivate loving relational attention and storytelling through their friendships as a basis for climate justice organizing. Friendships that encompass and commit to more than human connections with the living world become a vibrant part of a process of building activist capacities in sustainable ways, providing close, embodied intellectual and emotional ties as a foundation for broader collective engagements. The relational and the relations and identifications honed across a myriad of young activist efforts to organize in the pursuit of climate justice has enabled capacious forms of caring and intimate publics, to use Lauren Berland's concept, that exceed the normative confines of romance, family, and nation, to encompass generative modes of political and ecological engagement. At the heart of this process, friendships emerge as pivotal, intimate ties that propel and shape the counter-public urgency of climate justice work and give shape to alternative narratives that disrupt one-sided focus on neoliberal individualism and isolation. This forges caring bonds between activists while also encompassing affection and advocacy for an array of natural and social worlds beyond, generating shared feelings and visions that underpin the imaginative horizon of climate organizing. In this way, climate justice friendships can be understood beyond a privatized insular dyadic model of friendship to encompass more expansive spaces of interconnectivity and justice seeking, pedagogically vibrant across their differences. As such, the contours of friendship defy binary notions of public-private, proximate distance, human-non-human, political, personal, reason, emotion, as they explicitly challenge these divisions as part of an extractive and unjust system at the heart of climate breakdown. Such challenges emerge through everyday messy practices and orientations of young activists' ephemeral embodied connections to local communities, living ecologies, and interpersonal attachments, crisscrossing political issues and institutional boundaries that have historically dichotomized effective dimensions of everyday experience, from abstract, rational, human-centric conceptions of the public sphere. The intimate public proximities of friendship are simultaneously oriented towards care, reflection, awareness, and action, encompassing different scales of relational experience and rendering the bonds of friendship a complex, challenging, and prefigurative space of social change. Young climate storytellers are embracing the value of friendships at the heart of their everyday work of learning and expressing how to survive and also imagine alternative worlds. Friendship amongst youth within the context of becoming is in the context of becoming an emergent practice that helps them connect across broader and often distant networks while simultaneously honing in intimate bonds, doing the difficult work of reaching beyond what is familiar and known while harnessing the emotional comfort and trust of intimate mutual care. Friendships secure material, affective, and intellectual bonds within a process of learning how to grapple with intensifying realities of precarity and crisis. Friendships enact the nuanced relational capacities for love and respect overlooked within normative, dominant, institutional approaches to politics, generating possibilities for joy in the midst of collapsing systems, driven by separation, suffering, and doubt. As micro-political dimensions of experience, their value exceeds instrumental logics focused on outcomes, fostering connections as ends in themselves, a chance to communicate with, learn from, and feel heard by others. Friendship emerges as an assemblage of words, acts, knowledges rooted in the present and extending toward the horizon of uncertain climate futures. It becomes useful to open up conceptualizations and valuations of friendship within the flux of their ongoing movements and valuations that are in between language, thought, and action, rather than fully demarcated, legible objects of knowledge. Aaron Manning writes of the relational valuations moving as complex relays of gesture to sound, from vision to touch. Valuing the incipient qualities of expression is to feel language's impulse, to express the taking form of thought moving. Valuation as an immanent process that situates expression's final form in a relational attitude toward the world, where language dances, thoughts becoming form, end of quote. While the capacities and valuations of youth activist relationships go beyond discrete concepts, lists, or evaluative frameworks, I will draw upon the interconnected work of three young activists who speak and write passionately about friendships across their media storytelling. Tori Choi, Michaela Loach, and Dominique Palmer are mutual friends linked through a range of media and campaigns who persistently voice the relational force of learning, laughing, supporting, protesting, and grieving together in the flux of their ongoing climate justice work. They articulate the mutual care of friendships as a subtle and long-term process of grassroots political participation that accrue in spaces of physical and digital proximity, slowly over time, through commitment, responsive listening, and dedicated attachments. Friendship becomes embraced as a continuous and reliable source of wonder, gratitude, and connection to the world, countering the disruptive, disappointing, and isolating effects of overlapping crises. Tori Choi articulates the generative power of friendship as a basis for sustained activism across her writings and social media, addressing the overwhelming psychic exhaustion of confronting climate injustice, Choi also challenges individualizing solutions, taking up the question of climate anxiety and the ways dominant frameworks surrounding mental health work to perpetuate individualist models of sickness and wellness. Choi grapples with the broader ideological and embodied problems of disconnection. In her book, she explores how building capacities for close connections with others within the process of climate justice work overcomes logics of separation that underpin both ecological and psychological alienation, enabling ways of grieving together and making change. Choi disrupts medicalized approaches to mental health, addressing climate grief and anxiety that privatize suffering, focusing on the socioeconomic context of harm and collectivist modes of responsiveness. Using her personal experiences of deep friendship within communities that help her to cope with the existential climate catastrophe and provide close-knit dialogues, her writings offer intimate peer-to-peer exchanges of knowledge and support. Choi does not romanticize friendships or smooth over the tensions and exclusions within community building, staying with them to critically reflect upon and open up difficult conversations. She also talks about the pleasures and solace friendships offer in the daily practice of working through ideas and collectively holding space for grief and sadness, and relying on each other to share the work in a way that balances safety, skills, and strength as a collective process. Friendship can also facilitate ways of experiencing entanglements with the natural world and building of inclusive commons, refusing easy solutions or isolated fixes to both the psychosocial and ecological dimensions of climate crisis. Choi reframes them through the lens of working on the quality of relationships in the here and now, as well as recognizing their political value towards future-oriented movement work. In this vein, the loving proximities of friendships generate capacities for repair and belonging, while maintaining lucid, pragmatic attention to ongoing realities of suffering and harm. Michaela Loach is also dedicated to showing how her activist work is shaped, nurtured, and propelled through her close friendships. While short-form social media storytelling is part of Michaela's media practice, it's important to pay attention to the more expansive forms of discussion across various forms of media. Her Yikes podcast is a vivid enactment of links between personal and political climate communication. Working with her friend Jo Becker, the intimate style of this podcast propels a process of questioning systems of power while addressing the emotional stakes of surviving and challenging them. Yikes episodes delve into a wide range of topics, including the urgencies of decarbonization, reflections upon attending large-scale climate conferences, the rise of eco-fascism, youth litigation, racist policing, activist burnout, war, and much more. Conversations about the limits of institutionalized relations are woven through the intimate experiences of Loach and Becker's relationship as they navigate issues relevant to their lives as young activists and students. Their trust and comfort with each other offers spaces to express doubt, name contradictions, and challenge each other's assumptions with grace and respect. This expression of vulnerable feelings and ideas within the public realm of podcasting rests on the relational closeness of their friendship and their desire to invite close and emotional listening. Loach has also written a book, and she addresses other young people in a nuanced, informal style of advice giving, hinging on friendship-centered political pedagogy and participation, telling her young readers about her mistakes, challenges, and feelings of sadness, alongside practical insights guiding her activist journey. Loach offers a holistic narrative that includes recognition of small, intimate struggles as well as big accomplishments. She addresses her readers as a mentor and a friend with experience to pass along, giving a gentle yet persuasive nudge to youth to learn about climate justice through an ongoing process of building close connections that encompass ties with their local environments and communities. Dominique Palmer's activist stories are also designed to affirm and expand her congenial ties with others. Her social media relays various facets of her life as enjoyable collaborations, speaking at events, going to protests, showing off sustainable fashion outfits, making music, bird watching, and walking in the woods. Palmer does not merely focus on intersecting social and ecological relationships shaping her vision, she also expresses her awe and appreciation for what they teach her. She expresses amazement at the work her friends are doing, uplifting their knowledge and capacities as integral to what she continues to learn and rely upon. Emphasizing close attachments and more broad-reaching activities, her political engagement crosses multiple arenas of intervention, embracing intimate, loving interactions at the core of her project. Palmer's series on climate joy draws out the convivial possibilities of making change. Palmer talks about her own joy amongst the trees, of loving cows, of dressing up in fairy cottagecore, vintage clothing, and communing with friends at the end of a long day of fighting for legislation for opposing a fossil fuel company. Not only does she give public talks on climate joy, but Palmer nurtures a playful style across dialogues with others. Her video series on climate joy includes conversations with Tori Joy and Michaela Loach, moving in many directions across their specific experiences and shared encounters. The point of telling stories of joy and hope in the midst of crisis is not to create a single story or solution, but rather to enable generative spaces for imagining and building relational capacities of care and understanding. Talking with her friends about joy, she reveals prolific ecological, political, and social connections that do not rely on the logic of sameness. Young activists are expressing how their proximities to ecological ruin and injustice can be understood as simultaneously mobilizing intimacy, hope, and joy, enabling possibilities of survival and world building. Friendships within context of climate justice, activism, embody recognitions of more than human interdependencies that defy narrow individualistic logics and foster life-enhancing relationships as integral to meaningful political engagement. Refusing to detach political action from subtle, small-scale, and ephemeral gestures of joy and care, they foster counter-public intimacies that challenge prescriptive and hierarchical norms. The ways young people's climate storytelling centers upon the generative capacities for friendship offers insights into political practices, pedagogies, and communications attuned to the nuances of close relationships up against systemic forces that work to ignore, devalue, and undermine them. Thank you.